David, I would like to start by asking you about your early years in Toronto, my hometown too. You were born in 1931, and within your first 6 years, you personally experienced a coronation in London, were in the presence of Adolf Hitler, witnessed the German army preparing maneuvers to invade Belgium, etc. Please tell me more about these experiences.
Well, you've certainly cut to the chase. I think this is not about me. I was persuaded to write the book by business associates, friends, and educators because it was the times that I was born. Nothing to do with me. Being born in 1931 was a unique time. So I experienced a touch of the Depression. My father, being a distinguished war hero in the First World War, was invited to the coronation of King George VI. And so I sat in the stands outside Buckingham Palace and left an indelible impression, that golden coach and the Royal Horse Guards. Then, my mother being an opera singer, we were invited over to Bayreuth, to the Wagnerian Opera Festival, and we were in the presence of Hitler. Then in driving to Berlin, all the maneuvers where the panzer divisions and the infantry, Wehrmacht, were all exercising down to the border, turning around. That happened 14 times. And then 15th time, they went through to Paris, literally on motorcycle cars in some cases because of the circumstances of the time. So then I visited the graveyards and the monuments of the First World War, standing next to my dad. The only time I saw him cry. He was awarded the Military Cross twice for bravery, and yet it was so emotional. And my darling wife, Jill, where is she? Oh, Jilly, is taking me to the site where he was wounded, and apparently bound himself with sulfur. All we had in those days was no penicillin, but sulfur and bandages. And he then went over the top that night to rescue his men who were caught on barbed wire. The second time he learned a lesson. If you're going to get wounded, don't wear your uniform because it has bacteria. You've been in the trenches for weeks. So he went out in his underwear, got hit again for his efforts, and so he was a remarkable man. But he never talked about the war. And Jilly's going to take me back to the very site he was wounded. His regiment, just this morning, located the site where he was positioned in the 8th Canadian Battalion. So that'll be very exciting. But the point is, those experiences at a young age, and that bears a lot to what I'm going to say in a bit about education. At age 6, I was totally aware and remember those moments, and they were a very formal part of my life. And for example, at 6, I was so impressed by the Horse Guards and that pageantry at the coronation. 13 years later, I joined the Horse Guards and active duty for a year and 4 years of reserve. It shows you that perhaps if I had been a child at risk, like we have in our community, I would probably join a gang at age 6, be signed up, because I didn't have that great opportunity that I had. And that's also why Jill and I are very active in the educational area, building these schools, because I believe that is the moment in life, between 6 weeks and 5 years, that mind sets for as far as discipline, respect, character. That's why a child of 4, we all know that 3 or 4 years of age, they can speak 2 or 3 languages. I don't speak one, but badly. So it's a child's world. The brain is like a sponge,
Right.
and when it's not exercised, for example, in the community here, the 15-year study has proven a child at risk who hasn't had preschool education, formal, what happens is there's 70% chance by the time he is 18, he will be a criminal. Now in our schools, for instance, one in San Diego and in Las Vegas, 70% would join gangs of underprivileged children because they get no respect for the first 5 years. Why not? Mm-hmm. And they think that that's when they first got respect. So 70% are inclined to join. Our schools, 90% don't. What more do we need to know on that subject?
It's amazing. When World War II came to an end, you were 13 years old, and your parents were scrambling to find a suitable school for you. How did that experience unfold?
Well, that was really the crossroads, the watershed of my life, because the war years, those 5 years, was pretty lonely for me, only because my older sisters all were doing their own thing. One joined the Air Force, one was artists and so on. So I was shipped out to a ranch in the Western Canada in the summer, and there were no young kids at all, so I had to make my own fun and pleasure. So they
And you were born in Winnipeg.
Sorry?
You were born in Winnipeg.
Yeah. So at Banff, Alberta, my uncle, who was a general in the First World War, had a ranch, and so I was there, and my total company for the summer was my horse. And it was great. One day I was Custer, and the next day I was Custer's last stand. So my parents decided he's 13 now, and the war is over, and there's chaos, the troops coming back, and it was chaos in the community. We better send him to a boarding school. Great idea. So I was moved out of Upper Canada College, day school, and made a boarder at Trinity College School. Well, that was all fine and well, but arriving at 13, I was the youngest boy in the school. To get a place, my father said, oh, sure, he may have known or not known, but jumped a form. So everything was Greek to me from then on, except history and English. And so really interesting times. So by the time I was 16, my father had definitely come to the conclusion that I was dumb as a doorpost and couldn't pass exams except I'd get A's in history and 0 in mathematics.
But you skipped 2 forms.
Yeah. So, it was just, I didn't figure it out. And because at 13, I just thought this is the way life is. And my dad was so busy, he wasn't told. But so they stuffed me in the attic of the headmaster's house. And then I was put into the school and became the easy punching bag, because there I was scrawny and 13.
Ooh.
Well, that was good for me.
So if you fast forward 3 years, your dad calls, you write about this in the book, your dad summons you to the study.
Oh, yes. When I was 16, called in on a weekend. We used to get 1 weekend holiday. So he called me into the study and he said, son, I love you a lot, but you're not doing well in your exams, so I'm going to give you a choice. You can travel every summer while you're in school years, every holiday. I'll dump you off on a tramp steamer or whatever gets you there. You get $10 a day, which was plenty in those days.
Right.
Get 1 beer a day and not much else. But anyway, so that, or I'll leave you a little sum of money when you graduate, if you ever do, to start a business. So I decided I'd go for my PhD in travel. So here I am, 70 years later, 8 million miles, and with a PhD in travel, which gave me and perhaps explained why my little business ventures invariably never were in the same business. Because in one condition, he made me travel alone. First, I thought he wanted to get rid of me. And why be alone? When Jill and I travel in Europe and we see packs of children going over there for their wonderful education, they sit there and flirt, drink, and carry on and go to a couple of museums, which really doesn't do much for the development. By me going alone, he knew I'd be an observer. I'd be listening when I'd rather be talking. And I'd meet people.
You must have met some very interesting people because you went to some very interesting places. Who were some of the people you met on your travels?
I don't bring that subject up much in the book because I was advised, don't drop names, because that's just makes it very light. But if I ever wrote another book, I got some stories.
Oh, good.
But my first encounter was I ended up in Madrid, went to a bullfight, went into a tapas bar, and was standing at the end of the bar with my usual uniform. It was a blazer, white ducks, and a clean shirt. And this gray, semi-gray bearded fellow in the corner with an entourage called me over to the table and he said, "Young man, are you doing anything? Are you alone? Would you like to join us for a drink?" That ended up being 2 weeks, traveling the whole tour of the corridas with Ernest Hemingway. If I'd been with a friend or a pack of friends, there's no way I would have been engaged by Mr. Hemingway.
Right.
Then I had a budget of 1 beer, so I went to the Ritz Hotel in Madrid one evening, and there was a lady that'd been in a meeting, beautiful lady in the corner, and when her obvious business associates had left, she called me over. And I thought, oh, this is quite tasty. Not at all. It was Grace Kelly.
Oh.
And she'd had so much to drink. They'd been plying her, I guess, to get her to do a film, that she asked me to escort her, and that's all, to her room, which I did. So, and on and on. And
you talk about the value of traveling alone, and it gave you the opportunity to observe perhaps more than speak. And when you think about the impact on your business life, I know you write about this in the book a little bit, what value did you derive from that experience of traveling alone and being able to be a keen observer? And in particular in the book, you have a story about when you were on your golf course in Fiji, when you had a big hunch or a big epiphany.
Every one of the companies that I was involved with, or the startup, was just inspired by, in fact, much to my wife's chagrin, I've become a dreamer. I don't like driving a car because I'm constantly looking. And so ideas come to my mind. And in this case, Jill and I were on the golf course, our little golf course in the island, and the couple in front took out a bottle of Evian from their golf thing, which we supplied. And I said, something wrong with this picture. Jill said, what are you talking about? The parrots croaking too loudly, or what's the problem? And it was just the fact, here was somebody drinking a bottle of French water from a population center of 2 billion people, pollution, when I felt within 100 miles of where I was standing, there was the ultimate water. So we discovered the water, and I was so convinced, because in America, if you remember, in '96, there was so much press about the pollution of cities. City water was undrinkable, And just I felt it was the time. So people said, well, have you done a marketing survey? No. I built the factory right over the discovery of the aquifer and started Fiji Water.
But weren't there like 600 other companies doing that at the time?
That's all. The reason I sold Fiji Water eventually is because bottled water became a commodity. It went from 600 to thousands. And, I just lost interest, and somebody really wanted it badly, so I sold it because it was commoditized. I lose interest in things that are a commodity. I want things that are so unusual and perhaps survive the commodity experience.
So when you think about that, from that moment of epiphany to when you sold it, and there have been business case stories written about Fiji Water and particularly kind of your marketing strategy. Maybe you could touch on kind of, I know there are three components to subscription really probably across a lot of your businesses, but can you talk about the business case and kind of your three steps?
Well, this is an unusual story, Fiji Water. Beverage companies were huge. They'd launched a new brand with $10-20 million off the gate in television and publishing. So I said, I'm not going to play that game. I'm not going to pay for play where stores like Publix are paid to get end aisle displays and superior displays. I said, I'm going to do it on the merit of the product. So we had 36 tries at this design, which has been slightly altered since I sold the company. But it was a stunning, eye-catching design that you could spot it in a movie, television series, across a crowded room. And so taking the time to do this, we finally took a year to make the design. The square bottle instead of a round bottle, the see-through label. It told the story. But there's no point in having a beautiful package if it isn't followed up. So the three things you're referring to were my mantra. Visibility, number one. So I created the visibility by design and then putting it into the arena, not by newspapers or television ads, but by very careful placement. Supplying the charities of America, getting it in the restaurants, marketing it in a different way. I remember I used to get myself into a Coca-Cola truck or whoever was distributing, and my knees under my chin, and the driver says, "Oh, Mr. Gilmour, what a pleasure to have you. I'll take you out to meet your clients." And I said, "No, please. Take me to every client that wouldn't take Fiji Water." So I go there and I'd hand them my card, uncork the top, "Please taste it, here's my card." And they'd say, "Oh my God, Mr. Gilmour, you're the owner, you're the chairman. I've seen it in films and movies. I'll take it." So then we had enough of a head of steam that when Coca-Cola got around to telling Publix, "Take it off the shelf, we're paying you to be there," they said, "The hell with you. We're selling enough, and if I take it off the counter, our clients will be furious," because we had enough traction. That was their mistake. We got the traction, and it worked, and within 8 years, we were selling 10 million cases a year and became the fastest growing premium beverage in the world.
You start off your book, "Health is our real wealth." How did you come to that conclusion, and what impact did that conclusion have on the starting of Wakaya Perfection?
Well, the shock of my life are two things, since, again, it's not about me, it's about the timing. 1931, I remember traveling in Europe, so impressive was the health of the German people, the French, the English, except in situations of poverty. but the people were healthy and appeared to be quite well educated. I am staggered how the health of America has declined. I don't know whether it's a suicidal wish, it's not caring, or not having the character. But in 1990, to give you a couple of stats to back it up, in 1990, 10% of America was obese. Today, it's over 30%. That's a staggering change. In a couple of years, 1 out of every 3 Americans will have diabetes. Now, when we did our research on Wakaya Perfection, these amazing stats came out. Guess how many colas are sold a day? 1 billion colas are sold a day. And whenever you see somebody that may have a weight problem, guess what? They're usually on one end of a cola. And even a diet cola is poisonous because they use aspartame and fructose sweeteners. So that's a shock. Obesity is also to do with saturated fat. Bad news for all of us that are beef eaters, but 10 billion animals are slaughtered a year. 10 billion. So everything became the hamburger society, the fast food society. So if you take saturated fat and you take any form of sugar, what are you doing? 1, you reach obesity, but more important, that's the favorite food of cancer. Cancer can hardly exist without sugar and saturated fats. Cancer is the biggest worry we have, a plague, but I just don't see the, hello, is anybody up?
But you kidded around, actually, when you make comments about all that, which is true, is that you're becoming a little bit more of a critic, right, than an author.
Yeah.
And so what did you do about it, right? Because you're a man of action. And
That's certainly a quick story on that. Having the success, I guess, of Fiji Water, I was invited to be guest speaker 5 years ago at the American Express Luxury Conference in Miami, Four Seasons Hotel. 400 American Express people, 4 days to decide what is the greatest luxury in the world. So at the end of 4 days, everybody had come to the decision that time, a little more time in your life, time was the total luxury. So I was the last speaker, and I stood up, and I hadn't even had a glass of wine, but I said an outrageous thing. What's the point of having more time if you don't have your health? By 5 o'clock, I had them all convinced. And I'm driving back up to Palm Beach. And I'm like, good God, Gilmour, after all these years, you've become, instead of an author, you've become a critic. What am I going to do about it? So my team, Jason and David Roth, and my team got together and we researched what is a real health issue. Time magazine, you might have seen the cover, the cover was, the silent killer is inflammation, arthritis, Alzheimer's, heart disease, obesity, all to do with inflammation. I thought, well, that's an answer, but it must be more powerful and something that doesn't become a commodity where everybody jumps on and all kinds of fraudulent substitutes come in. So we found in Fiji that the indentured Indian labor coming from India in 1895 brought a sack of root for ginger and turmeric. And then they cut the seeds and they grew for decades. In the bordering of the sugar fields, which they were brought there to farm, the seeds would escape into the jungle. So we went in and studiously collected the wild ginger, but the original one, not the ginger that's grown today on land that is not organic, a lot of chemicals in it, and exhausted land. It's like asking your wife, would you like to have 400 children? That square acre is tired. So our land is virgin, volcanic, rich in nutrients, this extraordinary seed, and then we experiment a lot with the way we treat it.
In your book, you write about patience, and I quote, "Here I raise a word of caution for would-be entrepreneurs, and the operative word is..."
Would be, not wimpy.
Would be. Definitely would be. And the operative word is patience, not to be confused with bureaucracy. It's never easy to convince people, whether they are bankers, potential investors, or possible clients of something that does not yet exist. You talk in the book about how the CEO of one of the largest soft drink bottlers, Mr. Honickman of Philadelphia, a legend in the beverage industry, advised you that you didn't stand any chance whatsoever of success. For would-be entrepreneurs in your audience, what do you mean by patience?
The undoing of most startups is the lack of patience. I have a formula of 7 little things that you must never neglect. And a startup is like a chain. And there's 7 links, and it's only as strong as the weakest link. So if it's design, service, marketing approach, an adequate capital, all these things, it just takes one of them and it fails. And that's why 9 out of 10 startups fail. And it's usually, when it came to finances, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. By the time you get to that bridge and you're looking over your shoulder, spending half your time raising capital, it's too late.
I think it's since 1968, you haven't taken a salary, you don't have a company car, you haven't had one of those for decades.
Pure stupidity. No, in 68, when you're raising funds, starting a company, you realize you lead by example. And I never got rid of the habit. I should have changed. My partner was taking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I was taking nothing. Father may have been right. But my calculation was, when you're starting a company, you're building it to get a multiple. 5 times earnings, 7, 10, these days up to 30. If I spend $1 on expenses or a company car or taking a salary, I'm taking, if the multiple is 7, I'm taking $6 value out of the company. And I've never been able to get rid of that thought. Other people have no problem. And as I say, that's my only regret.
You also write in your book about one of the moves that you made that cost you a lot of money, right? You've been very successful by all measures. But what advice, looking back, would you give to folks that are operating businesses, thinking about selling the business or stepping back, when to kind of fish or cut bait, so to speak?
Well, there are 2 things. I think it's the person you are. I suggest to young people, think carefully when they start up and it's successful and they decide to cut bait and take a profit and move on. Better be a very good reason. I am not the wealth. I did not acquire the wealth that I could have, because why? I would have had to live in a place that Jill and I didn't want to, and life's too short. I mean, I will not sacrifice. So,
are you talking of Barrick Gold in Toronto?
Yeah. I mean, if I'd hung in, my partner and I were 50-50, I missed the boat as far as the major fortune, but no regrets, because I'd be still living in Toronto today which I've lived in London and Paris with Jill and New York, and life has been wonderful. If I'd been trapped in one place, so I sort of believe this thought: men make money, but money does not make men. And so you got to decide, is the game, now I'm not saying that money isn't a great measure of success, but I'm happy with our life, and it's been very satisfying and rewarding, that sense of adventure and what I've done, but money was not the
Wasn't
goal.
the primary driver
Yeah,
or the
yeah.
only driver.
In Silicon Valley and other startup communities, it is said if an entrepreneur has not had a setback, then he has not taken a risk, and that these setbacks are learning opportunities. You've had great successes, but did you have any learning curves that helped define you?
Annie, how long have you got? But I'll mention just a couple of amusing ones. So amusing for others, not for me.
Okay.
But this is in 1960, and my partner and I, who's an engineer, and I consider myself a tastemaker in the sense of spotting the opportunity and guiding the design. And in those days, we felt that home entertainment was about the ugliest thing you had in your living room. Do you remember the high gloss cabinet and the big gold logo on the front? It was this ugly appliance in your decorated drawing room. A joke. But people, that was all it was. It's available, and that was it. So we went into the industry very successfully. It was the fastest growing business in Canada since the Second World War, junior industrial.
That's Clairtone.
Yeah. What we did was take an elegant design, no bright logos on front, no gold flecked grill claws. We invented stereo. Up to that point, there'd only been monophonic sound, and stereo was a very amusing gimmick. Then we were the first to move from vacuum tubes to transistors, which was a major move. There was the most delightful old man in 1960 called Mr. May. He had been founder of the May department stores. They're no longer around, I believe, but they were the great fashion stores of the era across the country. And old Mr. May was getting to the end of his life, and I met him to pitch him on carrying our fine product, and he got very excited. He said, I want to give you the auditorium in St. Louis. It was a huge auditorium, and I'm going to invite all our clients. I want to show me something spectacular. Well, we've been working on a secret project called Project G. There was a remarkable hi-fi set, and the first of the solid state transistors. So threw it together, beautiful piece, on stage, and Mr. May covered it with his red velvet blanket, and I came on stage. He introduced me, much excitement. Mr. Gilmour, would you please demonstrate the set? So I stood up over the set, took the cover off, turned on the set that had been finely tuned to give this extraordinary music, and what I got was sort of a Hiroshima-type plume of smoke that rose out of the set. Thinking quickly, I took the velvet over, and I said, now for my next trick. He laughed, even though it was the most expensive set in the world. We sold 3 that afternoon, because he said, anybody that has the nerve to do that, I want one. And that was coming too early. That was the point. The lesson was, don't jump the starter block. And I did, and paid with an embarrassing afternoon.
Clairtone, really, when you think about it, was really cutting edge and in a lot of ways kind of pushed the envelope. Where you stand today at 85 years old, you're operating Wakai perfection, but you're also operating Zinio, which in its own right is pushing the envelope. Zinio has 6,000 magazines, 150 countries, basically your digital magazine on your smartphone or iPad.
Printing on paper is 500 years old idea. And 10 years ago, I thought, this is unsustainable industry, eventually. It's cutting 35 million trees a year in America alone. This cannot go on, but also the age of invention. But that was before smartphones and iPads or anything else. And so I was too early, paid the price, been a real struggle, absorbed too much of my capital, which was, in hindsight, a mistake. But now it's coming right because, yes, it's taken 4 years longer than I anticipated, but it is happening now. That when you can get a magazine in 18 languages, with choice of the world, on your smartphone, and if I'm Russian in New York and I want to see the Russian car magazine, I can bring it down. On top of that, in working with IBM, we realized with their new technology called Watson, that if you could be on a landing pattern to Rome and want to know a certain technical thing or about the arts, and Watson will take all the information we've calculated over the years, all stored, all that content, distill it instantly and give it to you. That will be our breakthrough, and it's close.
That's pretty powerful. You and your wife, Jill, have been giving back for decades. You've opened preschools in Fiji and across the United States. Why is preschool education such an important focus for you and Jill?
Well, the reason I mentioned, the realization American health is going to hell in a tea cart. So is education. It's pathetic. A high school in New York last month graduated with pride 74% of all the students. 4% eventually qualified that they could go to university. It's spinning our wheels, the fact that every American should have a chance to go to university. No, there should be more trade schools, and you decide. University, there are 5 million jobs unfilled. Why? No. A really brilliant welder, there's a job right there paying, and if he's got management ability, he can become a millionaire being a welder. And there's all these things that are being ignored. And meanwhile, the root of the whole problem is between 6 weeks and 5 years. We've proven it in our other schools. So we were busily building in Vegas for Andre Agassiz. We built his preschool, San Diego. And Jill and I were 25 years snowbirds here, lovely home. We're as happy as clams in Palm Beach. 2 years ago, we realized there's a calamity building across the bridge. West Palm Beach and parts of it are just in terrible straits, which we will pay the price in 5 years if we don't listen. And that is, take a child, preempt the risk of crime, drugs, and that problem by just giving them a start between 6 weeks and 5 years. I became a horse guard. I could have easily been a gang member.
In addition to education, you mentioned you are passionate about health. In what way?
It's just in every sense of the word. The ability of this country to become great again is, I believe, 2 things, health and education. I've given you the statistics on the health spectrum. That's something, if we don't deal with it. This is the first generation where the previous generation will not outlive us. First time in American history, we'll outlive the coming generation. And it's just, if it was a mystery, and oh my God, is it a plague and a disease, a bacteria, a vitamin? What is it? It's just the discipline to do the right thing and realize that vegetables and fruits can be gloriously prepared. They give you all the nutrition you need. And we did a study on taking it from 1,000 to 0, what the nutritional value is. Fruits and vegetables are 800 to 1,000. A cola is 0.06. A hamburger is 17 out of 1,000. Pasta is 34. And then people say, well, I need my protein. Protein is in vegetables and fruits. And it's not a question of punishing ourselves, and I love upstanding rib Angus beef dinner as much as anybody. But it's in the moderation. Make that a treat, not a habit.